They thought I was just the friend's poor summer guest, until the night everything changed. The night my life cracked open, I was floating face up in someone else's pool, pretending the stars were mine. The water was warm, almost heavy, like it was trying to hold me there. Crickets sang from the edges of the manicured yard, and the distant hum of the pool filter throbbed like a mechanical heartbeat. I counted it the way some people count breaths, anything to keep my thoughts from turning on me. I didn't belong in this house. Everyone knew it, even if no one said it out loud. I was 19, broke, unsure, and temporarily living with my best friend's family because my own home had become a quiet war zone of slammed doors, disappointed looks, and things we all pretended not to talk about. The Thompsons' place was big, clean, calm, everything mine was. Their fridge was always full. Their voices never rose. Their rules were gentle suggestions instead of threats. And me, I was the stray they tolerated for the summer. I floated there, ears half underwater, listening to my own thoughts echo too loudly. Thoughts I had been avoiding for months. Thoughts about women. About softness and electricity and fear wrapped together so tightly I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. It had started with a kiss in May. One stupid, accidental kiss at a crowded party. A girl, warm mouth, laughing breath, nothing dramatic, and yet everything changed. Because afterward, when I lay awake staring at my ceiling, the realization arrived with terrifying calm. Oh, not confusion, not curiosity, certainty. I didn't know what to do with that truth, so I buried it, smiled, stayed quiet, became smaller, let people underestimate me because it felt safer than being seen. Especially here. K.H. Lowe was out that night, last-minute plans with friends who had cars and futures and parents who expected things from them. I stayed behind, saying I was tired. The truth was simpler. I didn't know how to exist in a room full of people anymore without feeling like I was lying. So I slipped into the pool instead. Floating was the closest thing to disappearing. That's when I heard the door. A soft click, glass sliding open. My body went rigid. Light spilled onto the patio in a warm, yellow rectangle cutting through the dark. I kept my face still, hoping whoever it was wouldn't look my way, hoping I could stay invisible a little longer. Then I saw her. Eliners. K.H. Lowe's mother stood barefoot on the stone patio, holding two mugs with steam curling gently into the night. She moved slowly, deliberately, like the world adjusted itself to her pace instead of the other way around. Loose linen pants, a soft sweater, dark hair threaded with silver, catching the light like something intentional, not something to be hidden. She didn't see me at first. She stepped closer to the edge, eyes turned toward the trees lining the property, as if she needed the quiet as much as I did. I watched her throat move as she took a sip. Such a small thing, such a dangerous thing. I hated myself for how closely I noticed her. I'd noticed her all summer. The way her voice never rushed, the way she listened like people mattered, the faint scent of lavender and clean linen that lingered in hallways after she passed. I told myself it was admiration, respect, gratitude. But deep down, I knew that was a lie I repeated because the truth felt impossible. She was my best friend's mother. She was everything I was. She was off limits in ways I didn't have language for yet. And still, my heart betrayed me every time she was near. She turned. Her eyes landed on the pool. On me. Time stretched thin. Her hand tightened around one of the mugs, knuckles pale against ceramic. I was suddenly acutely aware of how exposed I was. Wet hair slicked back, dark water clinging to my skin, the quiet intimacy of being seen when I thought I was alone. I waited for shock, for annoyance, for the polite disapproval adults reserve for girls who don't quite belong. None of it came. Maya, she said softly, my name carried across the water like it mattered. I didn't know anyone was out here. I swallowed and found my feet standing slowly as the water slipped down my waist. Sorry, I said, voice rough. I couldn't sleep. Her expression didn't harden, didn't question, didn't judge. I made tea, she said instead, lifting one mug slightly. Chamomile. Of course she had. The silence between us changed shape. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full of things I didn't know how to say and things she somehow didn't demand I explain. I climbed out of the pool, the night air biting against my wet skin. My tank top clung uncomfortably. I crossed my arms without thinking, suddenly self-conscious in a way I hadn't been moments before. Alina didn't stare. She set one mug down and studied my face instead, really looked at me, like she was reading something written there that I hadn't meant to share. "You're shaking," she said gently. "Stay here." She went inside and returned with a towel, wrapping it around my shoulders with careful distance, careful respect. The touch was brief, professional, and still it sent a quiet shock through me. "Thank you," I whispered. She handed me the mug. Our fingers brushed, my breath caught. "You're safe here," she said, as if responding to something much deeper than the situation. "You know that, right?" I nodded, but my chest ached. Because safety wasn't the same as being understood. I didn't yet know that this night, this small, quiet moment by a pool, was the beginning of something much bigger. That the girl everyone overlooked, the guest with no place to land, was about to be forced into seeing her own worth. And that the woman everyone respected was about to become the mirror I couldn't look away from. Ending line. I thought that night was just about not being alone, but it was really the first moment someone saw me and didn't turn away. They spoke about me like I was invisible, so I let them. I woke to the sound of laughter drifting up from the kitchen, easy, confident laughter that belonged to people who had never needed to ask if they were welcome. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned lazily above me, my body still heavy from the night before. The pool. The tea. Alina's voice telling me I was safe. I told myself it hadn't meant anything, that it couldn't. Adults were kind sometimes. That didn't mean there was depth behind it. That didn't mean she'd seen me. I showered, dressed, and went downstairs wearing my usual armor. Quiet politeness, lowered eyes, a smile that asked for nothing. K.H. Lowe's aunt and uncle were visiting. They sat at the island with coffee, mugs, and opinions, their voices carrying freely through the open kitchen. I hovered at the edge, unsure if I should join or disappear. "So this is the friend," her aunt said, glancing at me briefly before looking away again. "The one staying for the summer." I nodded, "Hi." She smiled thinly. "Must be nice," she said, not unkindly but not kindly either. "Getting a free place while you figure things out." Figure things out. That phrase landed heavier than it should have. K.H. Lowe laughed awkwardly. "Maya's just in between things." "In between," her uncle echoed, amused. "That age, huh? No direction. Kids these days take their time." I stood there holding my plate, feeling myself shrink. They talked over me like I wasn't there, about internships, about law school, about how hard Alina had worked to build her consulting business from nothing, about success, about worth. No one asked what I wanted. No one asked what I knew. I was just the poor summer guest, the extra chair, the girl floating between futures. And Alina, she listened. She didn't interrupt, didn't correct them. She moved calmly through the kitchen, setting down fruit, pouring coffee, her expression neutral. For a moment, disappointment flared in me, sharp and unfair. Then she caught my eye. Just for a second. And something passed between us, quiet, steady, grounding. I realized then that she was watching. She just wasn't rescuing me. Not yet. Later that afternoon, K.H. Lowe pulled me aside. "Ignore them," she said. "They don't mean anything." I smiled, I know. But I didn't ignore it. I absorbed it. That night I sat alone again, this time at the small desk in the guest room, scrolling through emails I'd been afraid to open. Rejection letters. Silence. One half-written application I hadn't submitted because it felt pointless. I heard voices downstairs, her aunt again, louder now. "I just don't get kids who don't know who they are. If you're not building something, what are you even doing?" The words hit harder because they echoed my own fears. I didn't hear Alina's reply, but a few minutes later there was a knock on my door. "May I come in?" she asked. I nodded. She stepped inside, leaning lightly against the doorframe. "I wanted to check on you." "I'm fine," I said automatically. She tilted her head slightly. "You don't have to be." The silence stretched, not awkward, not heavy, just honest. "You don't owe anyone a performance," she said softly, "including me." Something inside me cracked. "I don't know what I'm doing," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Everyone else seems so certain." She smiled, not sadly, warmly. Certainty is often borrowed confidence, she said. Real growth is quieter. I looked up at her then, really looked. And for the first time, I wondered if being underestimated wasn't a weakness, but a shield. Because while they spoke about me like I was nothing, Alina was already seeing something else. Something I hadn't learned how to see yet. They tested my limits in public, not knowing who was quietly watching. By the third week of summer, I understood my role in that house. I was background, useful when someone needed help carrying groceries, invisible when conversations turned important, safe to speak about, never necessary to speak to. It was a strange kind of freedom. Being overlooked meant no expectations, no pressure, but it also meant no respect. And respect, I was learning, was something people decided you hadn't earned long before you ever got the chance. That afternoon, Alina hosted a small gathering by the pool. Friends of hers, business associates, people with practiced confidence and voices trained to dominate space. I stayed inside at first, folding laundry, telling myself I didn't belong in those conversations anyway. Then Alina appeared in the doorway. "Maya," she said calmly, "could you help me bring the drinks out?" It wasn't a request dressed as charity. It was normal, assumed, equal. I nodded and followed her, carrying a tray into the bright afternoon light. Conversations paused for half a second when I stepped outside, just long enough for people to place me somewhere in their mental hierarchy. "Lo, she's K.H. Lowe's friend," someone murmured, "staying here for the summer." A woman laughed lightly. "Ah, must be nice." I set the drinks down and stepped back, prepared to disappear again. But then it happened. One of the men, gray suit, loud confidence, started complaining about a failed project. "The consultant didn't understand the market at all," he scoffed. "Total waste of money." Alina's expression didn't change. "What approach did they use?" she asked. He waved a hand dismissively. "Standard analysis. Honestly, I could have done better myself." The words were careless, arrogant. Before I could stop myself, I spoke. "That approach usually fails when cultural data is ignored," I said quietly, "especially with regional markets." Every head turned. The man looked at me, surprised, then amused. "And you'd know that how?" Heat flooded my face. I almost apologized out of instinct. But Alina didn't look at him. She looked at me. "Go on," she said. Something steadied in my chest. "I worked on a community-led research project last year," I continued, voice shaking but firm. "We found that ignoring localized behavior patterns skewed outcomes by almost 40%. The silence was sharp now. The man laughed. "You're saying you know better than my firm." "I'm saying the data does," I replied. His smile vanished. "That's impressive," another woman said slowly. Alina finally spoke. "Maya assisted me on a similar case," she said calmly. "Her analysis changed the direction of the project." That wasn't entirely true. But it wasn't a lie either. The conversation shifted. Questions followed. Real respect, crept into their voices, tentative at first, then solid. The man didn't speak again. Later, as people left, Alina stood beside me, watching the water ripple in the pool. "You didn't need to step in," I said. She smiled faintly. "You didn't need permission to speak." I hesitated. "You let them underestimate me." "Yes," she said simply, "because I wanted you to see how easily their certainty crumbles when truth enters the room." I swallowed. "You knew." "I always know," she said gently. "I just don't always interfere." For the first time, I felt something shift, not between us, but inside me. I wasn't invisible. I was unclaimed. And that meant my voice was still my own. They questioned my place, until I finally questioned theirs. Respect once earned doesn't arrive loudly. It slips in quietly, through changed tones, longer pauses, careful listening. I noticed it in the days after the gathering, in the way Alina's guests began addressing me directly when they returned, in how questions were framed instead of statements made about me. But with respect came tension. Because when people realize they've misjudged you, they don't always apologize. Sometimes they push back harder. K.H. Lowe's aunt did exactly that. It happened over dinner, the kind where the table was full, and the air was thick with opinions disguised as concern. I was halfway through my meal when she looked at me with a polite, sharpened smile. "So, Maya," she said, "Elena tells us you're quite insightful." I nodded cautiously. "I try to be." She tilted her head. "And yet you're not in school, not working, not exactly building anything tangible." The table went quiet. Old instincts kicked in: defend, explain, minimize. I felt 19 again, small, temporary. Before I could speak, Elena set her fork down. "Maya chose to pause," she said evenly. "That doesn't mean she's idle." Her aunt smiled tighter. "Pauses are luxuries, Elena. Not everyone can afford them." Elena met her gaze calmly. "Exactly." All eyes turned back to me. Something inside me hardened, not bitter but solid. "I'm not paused," I said. "I'm redirecting." The aunt raised an eyebrow. "To what exactly?" "To something that fits," I replied. "I've spent years performing versions of myself that made other people comfortable. I'm done with that." The word surprised even me. Silence followed, not awkward this time, but thoughtful. Later, Elena found me outside, sitting on the steps near the pool. The water reflected fragments of light onto the stone like broken constellations. "You didn't have to protect me," I said. She sat beside me, not too close. "I wasn't protecting you, I was backing you." I exhaled. "There's a difference." She smiled softly. "You're learning." I stared at the water. "What if I disappoint everyone?" "You will," she said honestly. "At some point, and you'll survive it." I laughed quietly. "You're very calm about that." "I've disappointed plenty of people," she said, "usually by refusing to be smaller than I was meant to be." I turned to her then. "Did it cost you?" "Yes," she said, "but it gave me myself." The space between us felt charged, not with something forbidden, but with recognition, like two truths standing too close together to pretend they didn't see each other. That night, alone in my room, I opened my laptop and finished the application I'd been avoiding. I didn't overthink it. I didn't soften my voice. I wrote honestly for the first time. I hit submit and sat back, heart racing. Whatever came next, it would be mine. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of being seen. They tried to humble me one last time and walked straight into their own lesson. The invitation arrived 3 days later. It was printed, formal, heavy with implication. An industry charity mixer-elena was expected to attend. Names I recognized even from the margins of my life were listed as sponsors. People who spoke in panels. People who decided what counted. "I don't have to go," I said when she handed it to me. Elena studied me for a moment. "I didn't say you did." The pause mattered. "I want to," I added, surprising myself. That evening I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual, not searching for perfection, just recognition. I chose something simple, clean lines, nothing apologetic. When we arrived, the room buzzed with importance, laughter polished, conversations curated, eyes that assessed before they welcomed. I felt it immediately, the shift. People remembered me now, or at least the idea of me. "There's the young analyst," someone said lightly, "helping a leaner these days." "Learning," I replied, "contributing." A man nearby smirked. "Careful," he said, "talent without credentials has a short shelf life." I met his gaze. "So does arrogance without results." He blinked. Elena didn't step in. She didn't need to. The moment came later, during a panel discussion gone wrong. A speaker misrepresented community data, flattened it, simplified it, weaponized it for applause. I felt the familiar burn rise in my chest. I raised my hand. There was hesitation, then permission. "What you're presenting ignores lived variables," I said clearly. "Your conclusions erase the very people you claim to represent." Murmurs rippled. The speaker faltered, defended, redirected. I didn't back down. I cited sources, case studies, fieldwork, truth. The room shifted. By the time I sat down, the applause wasn't polite. It was real. Later, someone approached me with a card, then another. The man who'd mocked me earlier avoided my eyes. Elena stood beside me, pride quiet but unmistakable. "You didn't rescue me," I said softly. She smiled. "You didn't need rescuing." Outside, the night air was cool, grounding. I don't know what this means yet, I admitted. It means they can't pretend you're invisible anymore, she said, and neither can you. I looked at her then, not with longing, not with confusion, but with gratitude so deep it steadied me. For the first time, I understood something simple and profound. Justice doesn't always arrive as punishment. Sometimes it arrives as clarity. They finally spoke my name with respect, and I learned how to speak it myself. The summer didn't end all at once. It unraveled slowly, the way meaningful things do, through small moments that carried more weight than anyone expected. Emails came in, invitations followed, not promises, not guarantees, but doors, real ones that didn't require me to shrink myself to fit through them. I sat at the same small desk in the guest room, rereading messages that used words like insightful, sharp, necessary. Each time I felt a quiet disbelief give way to something steadier. Belief. The house felt different too. Conversations paused when I entered, not because I was in the way, but because I was included. K.H. Lowe's aunt softened, though she never fully apologized. She didn't need to. Her tone had changed, and that was its own admission. One evening, as boxes began to appear in the hallway, Alina found me folding clothes. "You're leaving soon," she said. I nodded. I found a place, small, mine. She smiled, good. There was a pause, full but not uncomfortable. "You changed this summer," she added. "So did you," I said before I could stop myself. She raised an eyebrow gently. "How so?" "You reminded yourself why you do what you do," I said. "Not for rooms like that charity hall, but for moments where someone finds their footing." Her gaze held mine, thoughtful. "And you reminded me," she said, "that power is best used quietly." On my last night, I went back to the pool. The water was cooler now. The air carried the promise of change. Alina joined me on the patio, 2 mugs in hand, no ceremony, no pretense. "Chamomile," she said. I smiled, of course. We sat side by side, not touching, not needing to. "I don't know exactly who I am yet," I said, "but I know who I'm not pretending to be anymore." "That's more than most people ever learn," she replied. I hesitated, then spoke the truth I'd been carrying all summer, not as confession, not as burden. "I'm not broken," I said. "I'm just honest." She nodded, and honesty, she said softly, is a form of courage. When I left the next morning, no one called me the summer guest. They hugged me goodbye, asked when they'd see me again, used my name like it mattered. As I drove away, I understood something I wished I'd known at 19 when I first felt lost. Being underestimated didn't make me weak. Being unseen didn't make me small. And discovering who I loved didn't diminish me, it clarified me. Some people never face consequences for their judgments. But I learned the most important kind of justice doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like growth. They thought the story ended when I left, but that's when the world started watching. Leaving the Thompsons' house didn't feel like an ending. It felt like standing at the edge of something wide and unfinished, the kind of space that demanded courage instead of permission. My new apartment was small, 1 room, creaky floors, a window that faced a brick wall instead of trees, but it was mine. The first night there, I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, and listened to the unfamiliar quiet. No voices downstairs, no expectations humming in the walls. Just me. The emails didn't stop. They came from people who hadn't known my name a month ago, organizations asking for input, a research group offering a short-term contract, opportunities that didn't feel like charity but collaboration. For the first time, I was being invited because of what I could do, not because someone felt sorry for me. I remembered the pool, the night I'd wanted to disappear. The irony almost made me laugh. At one of my first meetings, I recognized a face from Alina's charity event. A man who had nodded politely then, nothing more. This time, he leaned forward when I spoke. "That's an angle we hadn't considered," he said. "Can you elaborate?" I did. No one interrupted. No one questioned whether I belonged there. Afterward, a woman pulled me aside. "You're grounded," she said. "People trust that." Trust. The word stayed with me. That evening, my phone buzzed. A message from Alina. Proud of you, no qualifiers. I stared at the screen longer than necessary. We didn't talk often now. We didn't need to. Whatever that summer had been, it didn't ask to be preserved. It asked to be honored quietly. And we were both doing that in our own ways. Weeks later, I was invited to speak on a small panel. Nothing glamorous, folding chairs, a modest crowd. But when I stood at the podium, heart pounding, I realized something startling. I wasn't afraid of being seen anymore. I talked about listening before leading, about respecting voices society labels inconvenient, about how easily people dismiss what they don't understand, and how costly that dismissal can be. Afterward, a student approached me, nervous, young. "I didn't think someone like me could do this," she said, "until today." The words hit harder than any applause. Driving home that night, city lights blurring past my windshield, I finally understood the shape of the justice I'd been chasing all along. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving myself right. About becoming visible not through force but through consistency, not through rebellion but through truth. Somewhere out there, people were still underestimating someone quiet, someone young, someone unsure. And now I knew this. They wouldn't stay underestimated forever. Because stories like mine don't end when you leave the house that sheltered you. They begin when you step fully into the world and refuse to make yourself small in it.